Hi, sometimes the strangest stories surface not from old documents or forgotten places, but from moments that seem to slip through time itself. One quiet winter night, a train appeared at a small station in Canada, a train that, according to records, should never have arrived at all. This video is created as a quiet narrative experience, something you can listen to calmly, letting a strange and uneasy story slowly take shape as it goes on. Late one winter evening at a small station in northern Ontario, the kind of quiet settles in that only exists when snow absorbs every distant sound. The highway noise faded into nothing. A few passengers lingered near the warm waiting room, and the public address system lazily repeated the schedule. Daniel Moore, the station duty officer, glanced at the monitor. A commuter train from the city was 7 minutes late, yet on the schematic it was already approaching the outer stretch of track. Beyond the platform, the rails disappeared into a milky fog, the lamps dissolving into blurred yellow halos. Daniel exhaled a cloud of steam and stepped onto the platform, preparing for routine work. The first thing he noticed was not a sound, but the absence of one. Instead of the familiar rumble and metallic screech, dim lights emerged from the fog, dull and uneven, like old lamps clouded by soot. The train appeared slowly, almost silently. Daniel moved closer and froze. The cars were blackened, their metal scorched in places, the windows opaque gray, some shattered, others warped as if exposed to intense heat. The train stopped with a heavy, muted jolt. The doors did not open. No announcement followed. The digital displays showed nothing at all, and on Daniel's control panel, the train was not listed anywhere. Standing before a darkened window, he gradually realized that there were people inside. Very still people. He backed toward the booth and called dispatch, emergency services, anyone who would answer. His voice rasped as he spoke. "There's a train here. Burned. Passengers inside, not moving." As he talked, he kept expecting someone to stand, wave, knock on the glass. No one did. The passengers sat in neat rows, heads slightly bowed, hands on their laps. Many of their eyes were open, staring straight through the windows without seeing the platform. When responders arrived, the doors had to be forced open. A rush of air carried the smell of soot, old fabric, and something else, like the lingering trace of a fire long extinguished. One by one, the passengers were brought into the aisle. They were clearly dead, yet their skin beneath the ash looked pale and firm, almost lifelike. There was none of the decay medical staff expected to see. Within minutes, another detail became impossible to ignore. The clothing did not belong to the present. Heavy wool coats with worn collars, headscarves tied in old rural styles, military caps, thick boots with wooden heels. On one child's knees lay a handmade cloth doll. From a burned satchel spilled cardboard boxes printed in an outdated typeface. It felt less like a delayed train and more like something that had arrived from a different era. In one car, a stack of paper tickets was found on a small table. Daniel picked one up simply to steady his hands. The stamp read, August 1943. The paper was yellowed at the edges but intact. Under the route line were station names, two of which no longer existed under those names. He read the date again and again, hoping he had misunderstood. An investigator climbed into the driver's cab. From the outside, the train resembled an old commuter model, but inside the controls were unfamiliar. Large mechanical levers, analog gauges, worn metal placards. Hanging above the seat was a conductor's cap bearing an insignia no longer in use. In a scorched pocket, they found an identification card. The birth year alone placed the man firmly in the early part of the 20th century. With every recovered object, the situation became harder to dismiss and more disturbingly specific. Nothing looked like props. The paper tore like genuinely old paper. The metal bore true age, not artificial distress. Coins recovered from beneath the seats were worn smooth, bearing profiles Daniel had only seen in history textbooks. He found himself afraid to blink, as if the scene might vanish the moment he did. By the next day, representatives from the Railway Authority arrived with thick folders. One was left on the duty desk. Unable to sleep, Daniel spent the night flipping through archival material beneath the weak light of a desk lamp. In one file, he found what he both feared and expected. Report on the loss of evacuation train number 286 during wartime operations, August 1943. The document described a train carrying civilians, children, and injured passengers that was lost during a wartime incident. Train destroyed. Severe casualties reported. Attached was a list of names. The same names now lay on a modern investigator's table, but the margins held something stranger. Handwritten notes mentioned an unnatural fog, the sound of brakes from a second train that could not be seen. Another line read, "Bodies of most passengers not recovered. Further inquiry postponed." The stated cause was simply wartime conditions, as if that explained everything. News spread quickly through the nearby town. By the third day, people gathered near the station entrance, carrying old photographs. A police officer tried to keep order, but the murmurs pressed in. What if they're ours? What if someone's there? An elderly woman grasped Daniel's sleeve and held out a photograph. A young mother in a headscarf, beside a little girl clutching a cloth doll. "She left in 43, the woman said, her voice breaking. They said the train was lost. No grave. Nothing." Against every instruction, Daniel led her into one of the cars. When she saw the familiar scarf and the doll, she did not cry. She whispered, "Mom," again and again, as if naming something finally made it real. For her, the loss became real only now, 80 years later. After that night, working the station after dark became unbearable. Track clocks froze more than once at the same minute. Radio operators reported fragments of unfamiliar transmissions mentioning evacuations and alerts. Daniel stopped dismissing it as fatigue. A decision was made to move the train to a secondary track. Too many questions, too many visitors. Late at night, when passenger traffic was minimal, a yard locomotive was connected. Daniel watched the control schematic, trying to convince himself this would end as a line in a report. Several officers and an investigator entered the cars one last time to document everything. They moved between the motionless bodies, shining flashlights into faces, as if expecting someone to blink. At that moment, the fog thickened abruptly. Platform lights flickered. On Daniel's screen, every other train vanished, leaving a single line labeled in an outdated font. The train shuddered, then began to move. "I'm not touching it," the yard engineer shouted over the radio. "Brakes aren't responding." Daniel hit emergency controls, but the indicators remained dead. The train moved on its own, carrying not only the passengers from 1943, but also the people who had boarded minutes earlier. Midway down the platform, the cars began to distort. Light bent along the windows. The figures inside blurred like images on old film. The rear car turned translucent, revealing station lights and falling snow through its walls. In one window, Daniel saw the investigator's face, frozen in sudden understanding. Then the train was gone. A week later, Daniel visited the regional archive. The same file was brought out. The pages were unchanged, except for the final list. New names had appeared at the bottom: the yard engineer, the investigator, the officer who entered the car. Their birth years were correct. Their date of death read August 1943. In the margin was a note dated decades earlier. List updated following review. The ink looked old, as if those names had always been there. Daniel resigned soon after. He kept one thing: a printed schematic from the control system. Among ordinary routes, one thin line remained. Train number 286 en route. No origin, no destination. Months later, riding another commuter line, Daniel glimpsed a parallel track through blowing snow. For a moment, a dark train moved alongside. Burned cars, dim lights, still figures by the windows. In one, a hand seemed pressed to the glass. Then it was gone. What troubled Daniel most was not that the dead had appeared once at a quiet station, but that according to the railway records, the train had never arrived anywhere at all. It remained listed as traveling, still in transit. Somewhere between years, moving endlessly through the same stretch of track.